recently I wrote an article called No Ammo, Good. And the point of that was to tell you that you don't really need ammo all the time in order to train, and you don't need to go to formal classes just to get range time in order to train. You can actually train dry, and also with other methods. And I'm going to look at the different methods that people will use and the pros and cons of each. So first one is, it's starting from the worst to what I feel is the best. So anyways, range only. So range only time is for people that have so much money that all they do is they go to the range in order to master their skills. And that's not how it works. However, people will say, well, this instructor or that instructor told me that in order to get better, I just have to go to the range and shoot more. That's absolutely BS, because you actually can enforce bad habits that way, because you're not actually seeing what you're doing wrong. And that's where you're not able to actually critique yourself and feel what right feels like, because every time you're sending something down range and you're just going through a process of insanity. So without having the knowledge to actually self-correct, unless you are having guidance on every single shot or whatever, then you're actually exercising insanity, doing something over and over and over again the same way and expecting a different result. And so if you don't have anybody correcting you or telling you to analyze yourself and make sure that you're doing X, Y, Z in the proper order, or doing it all at once during the shot or whatever, then you're not going to be actually training yourself. You're just going to be practicing those bad habits. So that's not how really special forces work, which is basically they're only ever at the range for the most part. But generally speaking, what you're going to find is they also will do some dry practice, which brings us right into range and dry practice. So the idea of the range practice is, say you do a course where you're doing mostly live fire. That's great. However, you're not really going to learn all of that. There's a difference between learning and being taught, because the brain can only learn so many physical skills at once, and you do actually need a recuperation time. So those 1 and 2 day classes, they actually set you up for failure. So if we were to treat learning to shoot kind of like a martial art, where you come in, weekly or bi-weekly or something like that, we'd have more success with that, and we wouldn't even need to actually have live fire all the time. We could actually learn what right feels like through other means, and we'll get into that. But anyways, going to the range and seeing what happens with recoil effects and a live fire, and getting a feel for what you're going to encounter and where your strengths and weaknesses are, and how the different components to shooting, such as grip and a sight picture and stuff like that, they're components, not fundamentals, because fundamentals are rules and principles in order to actually get an end result. They're components, and it's subjective to the situation that you're in. So yeah, it is what it is, but you're not going to apply all of them, therefore they're not fundamentals. They are components of marksmanship, and they can be applied in any order that is necessary for the context that you find yourself in. So anyways, say you go to the range and you find out all your weaknesses or areas that you need to work on, and then you go and practice that dry. Maybe that be grip, and then you do reinforcement training, which I've done videos on reinforcement training, but you practice them dry. You do stuff like the trigger drill, or you do reload drills, or you do malfunction drills, and you already know what it's like to have to put a round back on quickly because you ran over the motions. You may not have learned everything properly, but you have the steps in your head. Maybe you actually were the responsible student and actually took written notes when they were telling you the different ditties, such as ID, lock, clear, reload, stuff like that. But you practice it dry. So, and then you go back to the range and you check it again, and then you take notes. You should be taking notes, but then you conduct dry fire practice, and it's just this this loop that you find yourself in. You go to the range to verify your skills, and then you practice it dry. That's great, but it does rely on a lot of range verification. So I have a different step, which is this last part here. So I have dry fire, and then obviously you have to start out somewhere with formal training. You have to have an idea. You have to have some kind of initial guidance and some kind of supervision on the start of these skills, right? And that's pretty much the way it has to start out. However, when you actually get into training and practicing and stuff, this is really the best way that I've ever found, that where you're able to maintain and even learn new skills and refine them. So first you would do dry fire, and I would use A-zoom snap caps. The rimless ones are great for staying in the chamber, and you can just charge it just enough to get the striker back engaged again and back into the ready position, or putting it in a double action, you can just set the hammer back into the decock position, because there typically is a difference, except for like Berettas or whatever, where it is actually resting against the where the firing pin would be. So anyways, the next is, once you've done dry fire and you feel pretty confident that you're able to pull the trigger without moving the gun or whatever, then you would use like a laser. Now the laser is not something that it can be applied to manipulation skills such as malfunctions and reloads, because obviously it will stick. If you know anything about the G-Sight lasers, link in the description, it will be stuck in the chamber. Not like stuck, like you can't get it out, but you can easily use the back of a ballpoint pen, which I recommend, or an eraser from a pencil or whatever to push it out, but it's going to be staying in the chamber, and you're not going to be able to actually simulate that reload by actually seeing if you're reloading it wrong by popping a snap cap out and causing a malfunction through your reload technique. But as far as like trigger skills, draw skills, and stuff like that, the vital skills that you really need to practice on often, and you want to see if you're really accurate, this is where the laser comes in, because accuracy and speed has to go together. You can't say one or the other is better than, whatever. You can't say that speed is better than accuracy, and it's all context driven. However, in most scenarios, you're going to find out that having both of them together is actually important. So that whole thing of accuracy is fine, or speed is fine, but accuracy is final, that's a BS statement, because you actually need both. So anyways, just look at the real world for examples. And then of course, once you feel pretty confident, your laser is showing you that you've got the skills down pretty well, then you go to the range for verification. You don't go there just to have fun. You don't do any warm-ups. You don't do anything like that. You go into immediately self-qualification. So you do it cold. You don't get any dry fire in beforehand. You're basically simulating putting a gun on your hip and drawing and firing, and with movement or whatever, if you can, if you're able to at your range or whatever, but do the best you can with what your range limits are. And for me, I have as much freedom as I need and want. So, with that said, range verification, just like I said, if you're carrying, you're not going to get a warm-up when somebody actually forces you to have to use your firearm, or if you're on duty, you're not going to get a warm-up when somebody forces you to use your firearm. Okay, so that's just not how it works. So do not simulate that with range verification. Now, afterwards, you can try to apply some of that practice with the range. After you've seen where you might have weaknesses, you can try and drill out those problems or reanalyze through continued shooting. But the range should be still a teaching lesson. It should not be for fun. And if you're going to be having fun with the range, get a pellet gun or get something like that, but actually have a mental separation of the application of self-defense shooting skills or combat shooting skills. You don't want to corrupt the mind and corrupt the learning capability by adding in this fun context, because fun is not how it is when you actually have to use your firearm. So this is a verification, this is serious stuff, and this has actually helped me immensely, is taking that fun part out of it. The fun part is actually seeing growth. That's rewarding, that's fun. That gives you a good confidence boost, I guess you could say. But that's my way of training. So even if you don't really have very much ammo, you can still do this part right here. And you, like the rest of these, you're screwed if you only do this, which is most of what people do. They think going to the range is the only way they can train. That's BS. If you've ever shot before, then you should know better. But if you haven't shot before, I get it. You need to start out with the range to know what you're up against. But that doesn't take very much, but you still need a guided hand. So this one, you're going to have to rely on this, and you're going to have to actually figure out a way to do it competently, not just aimlessly doing it, click, click, click. You need to actually have a plan. You need to be mentally in the game, and you need to do it often. This is a perishable skill. It's an art. Shooting is like an art. It's not like learning history or whatever through rote memorization. It's different. So then this one, you have two different things that can verify. And you can verify it through sensing motion in your sights and, you know, manipulations of the gun. And then you can have a laser that actually illustrates whether you're on or not. And then you can apply a shot timer to this as well, if you wish, or whatever visual aid or whatever you need. So then, of course, if you do have ammo or whenever you get ammo, you go to the range and verify. This can save you money, this can save you time, this can save a lot of headaches, I promise you. But anyways, this is my thing on why not having ammo can actually be a good thing, because you can actually improve on your skills and refine those skills that you were not refining beforehand, because kind of when you don't have that much ammo on the market, or it's hard to find, you need to find some way to get your skills to be refined. And most of your skills are not actually skills, they're just jumbled bits of information that you have in your brain because you didn't actually learn from when you were taking a class or whatever, and you haven't actually learned anything yet. But you can do that in a safe environment, dry, and then you can spend a little money on a laser, and you know, you can get a good training value out of that. Probably more training value than actually going to a class and wasting your ammo and wasting your brain strength or brain energy on a class that's just going to self-corrupt itself over time. Instead of treating shooting like a martial art, we're treating it like it's a history class that we can just, or a history seminar. But anyways, with that said, go ahead and give this stuff a shot. I've got other videos on this, so check it out, and you guys have a good one.